Okay, good morning. We continue in the Shari Teshuva. We're still in the first gate, and we've read through Sif Vav, where Rabbi Yonah is telling us that a person, if they delay doing tshuva and they aren't very concerned that they should do tshuva on a certain avera, the person can now be termed a mumar ledavar echad, a heretic for one thing. That's where we ended off last time, and that's extremely serious. Someone who's a mumar ledavar echad, that means he does not have a chelek l'olam haba. He does not have a portion for the world to come, and it doesn't get much worse than that. So let's develop this a little bit over here. So Rabbi Yonah is telling us that the person will be a mumar ledavar echad. So the question is why? I mean, that seems to be a very strong thing, where the person is saying, I reject the Torah. I reject the Torah in this area. How is it by the fact that the person is not quickly doing tshuva to the particular avera makes him this mumar ledavar echad? So the answer is like this. If a person is aware of the fact that he has a weakness in a certain area and he totally neglects doing anything about it, he's basically said he really doesn't care about dealing with this particular thing. Now, there are two concepts in mitzvah observance. Number one is Hashem wants you to do X amount of mitzvahs, and each one is designated for a certain amount of growth for you. And therefore, you do every mitzvah, you grow in a certain way. That's point number one. Point number two, every time you do a mitzvah, there's an all-encompassing common denominator to all mitzvahs, which is, when you do any mitzvah, it means that you are accepting upon yourself the following things, if you realize this or not. Every time you do a mitzvah, you're accepting upon yourself the fact that there's a God who commanded you to the mitzvah. You're accepting upon yourself the fact that there's a God who has an understanding of how I should be dealing with my life. You're accepting upon yourself the fact that God is the king and I am his subject. You're accepting upon yourself the fact that I'm here to serve Hashem and do what he would like me to do for the benefit for myself and for the benefit for the world. So in general, the second aspect of mitzvah observance is there's an acceptance of Hashem as the king in terms of God's wisdom in how he directs my life and what I should do. So we have two aspects. There's the mechanical do's and don'ts, and there's that consciousness that Hashem is my balabas. He's my boss, and Hashem understands me. He's given me a way to live, and I accept upon myself the fact that Hashem is the king. So what Rabbi Yonah is saying is that very conceivably, when a person watches himself in all areas of the Torah, and in one area he is lax in, so in terms of the first aspect, he's doing pretty good. He's a pretty good batting average. He's 612 for 613. That's pretty good if you're a baseball player. But in terms of the second aspect, if a subject says to a king, I accept upon myself your rulership in all ways except for one. Except for one, I do not accept your rulership upon me. So what we're really dealing with over here isn't a person who's a pretty good servant, subject, where he does 99%. Really, the fact is, it's somebody who doesn't really accept the rulership of the king at all. It's not that you're the king in my life for 612 areas, and in one area not. It's not possible. Really, it means he's not a king at all. He's not a king at all. I don't hold you to be my king. It can't be, you're a king in one area, you're king in another area. And that cannot be divided in terms of accepting someone as a king. It doesn't work that way. I just got a call yesterday from somebody, out of the blue. I knew him as a young bucker. Last time I spoke to him, I don't know, it must have been 12, 15 years ago, at least. So, the guy calls me like he's like really yeshivish now. The family were about Teshuvas long ago. It was really yeshivish. You know what it means? The guy's really yeshivish. When he calls on the phone, it takes you 2 minutes to find out who's calling you. You know, I go, what? You know, they talk fast and not discernible, and you know, good there was a call display. I was able to put together the call display from what he was saying to figure out who it was. So I finally, okay, I said, so good to hear from you, Chves. And then, so why are you calling? So he says, I want to ask you a shayla. I said, where do you live? He says, he lives down south. You know, Lawrence and Bathurst area. I say, so don't you have a rabbi? You know, don't you have a rabbi? He says, yeah, well, yeah. So I say, let me repeat the question. Do you have a rabbi? Well, it's just having a hung. I say, you must be about, 30 years old. You're married, yeah? He says, haven't you been asking a rabbi any questions in your life? So I said, I'll tell you, I have a policy. I really don't answer shilas to people that I'm not their Rav to, who I know should have a Rav. So then he basically says, well, I'm basically calling you, he really, such a sweet, honest guy, says, I'm basically calling you up to get a heter, to get a leniency. And he doesn't know who he's calling.
Oh boy.
Cover leniency. So I said, this is that, what does that imply? See, you know what that's saying? It's the same thing here. It's the same thing. The guy's saying he has a rabbi. So if he has to ask him something that doesn't make a difference in his life, if he asks Shaila, is the pot kosher or not, which really doesn't make the biggest difference in your life, he has Rabbi so-and-so. And if he has to ask a question in Taras HaMishpacha, he asks Rabbi so-and-so. But if he wants to do something that he knows Rabbi so-and-so wouldn't like, he calls Rabbi Michalowicz, and all of a sudden Rabbi Michalowicz is the great important rabbi.
Tell him no.
No, this is what I answered. That's what I answered. So I tried to explain it to him. I said, I'm not trying to be mean to you. This is for your own benefit, that you should ask the person who really knows you, because I don't know you at all anymore, right? For your benefit. So I said, this is the answer to your shiloh. The answer to your shiloh is, you must ask your rabbi. Finished. That was the end of it. So, I'm sure it's the last time he'll ever call me. That's fine. No problem. But it's the same issue. Now the rabbi isn't Hashem, obviously. But if the person is he your rabbi? Is he not your rabbi? It's no such thing as, well, he's my rabbi for this and that. Oh, but for other things, I go to this other rabbi. Okay, so if he was calling somebody like a Gadol Hador, like a Steinman or somebody, okay, I can understand. You'd think your rabbi can't handle that difficult question. Perhaps. What we really should do is still call your rabbi, let your rabbi call Reb Steinman. That's what you're supposed to do. There is a concept, this person is your Rav, he's your Rav for everything. And the Rav will be the first one to say, this is out of my league, and I will, see, a rabbi can only answer a question based on the way it's asked. So sometimes when you ask it, you have an agenda, so you don't give all the facts. The rabbi will present it exactly the way it should be presented, which is also important. But the fact that he's asking me, and there's plenty of big holy rabbis down south, a lot more talented than me, so why is he avoiding them to go to somebody who's less important? It's a roll of the dice. Maybe he'll get the answer he wants. If he doesn't, there's another 10 rabbis in Thornhill who he thinks are more lenient. So that's the same thing. That's exactly the same that's going on. So over here, you can't say that Hashem is my king 99% of the time. But whenever he says something I don't like, then he's not my king. But you're my king 99% of the time. Go tell that to a king. He'll have your head off before you know it. You're my king, except I don't pay taxes. You're out, man. You're my king, except I don't honor the king. Whatever. It doesn't work that way. So what really is you're not serving Hashem at all. It's just God happens to be lucky. He happens to agree with you a lot of the time. If you recall, there was a famous convert to the Jewish people who became a TV personality who spoke for Jewish organizations. A woman who we need not mention her name, who when she got up to speak at a organization's dinner, she talked about her journey to Judaism, how she first converted Reform, and she thought it wasn't good enough, and she converted Conservative, and she thought it wasn't good enough, and then she found that Orthodoxy really, she learned about that, and a lot of the things Orthodox says, agreed with her. So I decided to be Orthodox, and when I heard that, I winced. I wonder who was the person that converted this woman. So it was. About 5 years later, she's publicly gave up Yiddishkeit and Ganzen. Totally. And that's it. Together with all the other things they found out about her. But so that's exactly the same thing. Because Judaism agrees with this, to become a Jew, doesn't work that way. So what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying is that we can make mistakes and do averos. And as I've said, Hashem can live with that temporarily. But when we neglect correcting the mistakes, then there's an underlying subconscious element where we are saying that we really don't care to accept the obligation in this area. Now again, we're not talking about a person who's going to try to improve and will fail constantly in that area. Hashem gives you a strong Yetzer Hara to do this Avera. That could be your lifelong challenge. And it could take you 30, 40 years till you finally beat it. If you're showing a concern and every year you clap an al-khair on this, says, I know this is a big problem I have and I've tried this. Maybe I could have tried harder and stronger, but it's something that bothers me and something that every year I think about it. And every year, like just no different than weight loss. There are people who really want to lose weight. They really don't, but for whatever reasons, they can't make it happen. But it's not like they just don't care. They care. It bothers them. The doctor says you're not healthy. It bothers me. And they've gone on many diets and broken many diets. So the person at least cares enough to try to change, hasn't developed the strength to be able to do it. That's one thing. That the radio is talking about delaying tshuva. You haven't done anything about it. So not caring to accept an obligation in this area has to, Rabbi Yonah is saying, has to affect our observance in other areas of Judaism. Because really, it doesn't really matter for you to please the king. That's not really the agenda. If a person says, here, in this area, you're not my master, it eventually has to reach into other areas. And Hashem won't be your master in other areas. It's only a question of time. It can't be that it won't affect others, because Judaism is a holistic system. It's not, well, in this area, me and Hashem are great, and in this area, I'm great. In this area, forget it. I don't want nothing to do with him. I'm going to call up the rabbi who gives me the leniency. Right? It can't be. You're going to look for leniencies in other places. Slowly, it erodes the system, because if there's the overall lack of fear of God, lack of wanting to have a relationship with God, then it doesn't matter. No. Can you imagine if a guy is married to a woman, and he says, dear, 612 out of 613 times, I'm a loyal and faithful husband. And when I see this secretary, I can control myself, and this secretary, and this woman is fine. But I want you to know, for this one, I'm sorry, you're not my wife in this area. Only this area. It only happens once every 613 days. Once every 613 days, I have a real great affair with this woman. So I want to know how many wives are interested. You want them or not? And it says, I ain't even going to try to hold myself back. I have an appointment in my calendar once every 613 days. Me and her, I go off to a conference for a day. I'm telling you, it ain't a conference. It's for my pleasure. So you're my wife 99% of the time. Is that the way it is? It can't be. It just can't be. You're not a husband any percent of the time. It just so happens that the other times it's convenient for you. You know, you have a career, you need someone to watch the kids, and you're okay as a wife most of the time. Most of the time you're okay, but you know, for this and that. Eventually what's going to happen, she ain't going to be a wife, she's a wife 0% of the time. Your husband 0% of the time. And that's what it is. It can't be any different. Oh, if the guy makes a mistake once and hey, he couldn't control himself for this and that and it's whatever, and he really feels terrible and he can't live with himself and I have to, that's different. But the guy says, well, you know, so in the course of our marriage, it'll come maybe, 20 times. This and that. Well, it ain't going to just be that. You know, whenever you catch a husband and he says, I only did it once, never believe him. I mean, okay, maybe if it happens to be the first time, maybe it'll come out.
First time it's once.
No, but usually when he's caught, it's not the first time. It's not the first time. It's not likely. Oh, it's the first time I ever did it. Yeah, it's the first time I caught you. It's the same thing. Yeah, Shelley.
So I was going to ask this yesterday too, but like the example the rabbi just gave, that's kind of fundamental to the marriage, but we're almost saying it's all or nothing. So for example, supposing the wife says, I don't like you going out every Tuesday night to play poker, and the guy every Tuesday plays poker with his buddies, and he's not a big gambler, he's not going into debt, but she doesn't want him to go, and he wants to go. So in this area, he's saying, you know what, I'm doing what I want to do. But doesn't mean that the marriage falls apart.
Okay.
So it's not all or nothing.
So you're right. I should have given this example even better. Even if he goes playing poker every night and doesn't care, or once a week, and doesn't care what his wife says, it ain't a marriage. Even if he doesn't, even if he, whatever, if a spouse calls another spouse and says, I want you to know, I really can't stand this. And it really bothers me a lot. Okay? Whatever it is. Whatever it is.
But you're putting that on the same level of having an affair.
Okay, so I'm saying even more. Yeah, it is. Exactly, that's the point.
So it's all or nothing.
It's not all.
That's what we're getting.
No. All or nothing means you have to do it all or nothing. And you have nothing. We're saying you have to try to do it all or nothing.
It has to matter to you.
It has to matter. All of it has to matter, right? Or it's nothing. Now you may fail. You could fail 612 out of 600. The husband will say, "I love you, dear, but I'm a schlump, and I'm a lo yutzlach." And you know, the wife says, "If you don't get up, you know, I want you to get up. I want you to take out the garbage or this." And the guy says, "Okay, I'll try it." And he doesn't do it. But he says, I'm trying, and it's hard. You know, if the wife says, I really want you to, but the husband says, you know, I want you to know, this is very hard for me. I will try, but it's very hard for me. My nature isn't like this. I had 6 brothers and no sisters. You know, and we just knew to always, leave the dirty laundry or whatever. And the wife says, this drives me crazy and I can't stand it. And if you loved me, you would do something about it. So if you love me, you'll try to do something about it. The guy says, I don't care at all if it matters to you or not. I'm just doing it. So it's all or nothing means if it doesn't bother you, if you don't try in all the areas, even if you fail. When we say it's not all or nothing, it means you don't have to succeed in all of them. It's not success in all or nothing. But if you don't care for all of them, then it's nothing. Because then you're not doing any of it for Hashem. You're not doing anything because you love that person. It's all for yourself. That's the point. If you don't care and you don't want to try in one area, then that means the whole thing is nothing. You don't care. If you married somebody, it's because you care about that person, don't you? I mean, can you imagine getting married to somebody you don't care about them? If the person says, I want you to know, there are 613 things that really make a difference. Okay, I know you're not used to it, and you're going to try, and we're going to work on it, and maybe you can't even get to all of them right now. That's all fine. It's the same thing, for example, if a person never had the knowledge of Torah and wasn't taught, what the mitzvahs are. And then all of a sudden, so he didn't know. So number one, the fact he's not doing the mitzvahs doesn't mean he's going against Hashem. Nobody told him. Nobody told him that you have to wear tefillin. So the fact he didn't wear tefillin means he rebels against God. He didn't know. Nobody told him that you have to give tzedakah. Okay. And then even when he does find out, he does become a Baal Teshuva. Hashem's not going to expect him tomorrow to be able to do all 613 mitzvahs. There's going to be a learning curve that Hashem has to cut him slack for how many years. And the guy will say, Hashem, I'm going to try to get to all of them in my lifetime. I might not. It's just so much to accomplish. I hope I can. I'm trying my best. That's okay. But if the guy says, there's no rush. The person knows it's wrong. You know it's wrong. And he knows why it's wrong. And he says, listen, there's no rush. I can't be perfect. So there's one area in my life that I can disregard. So Rabbi Yonah says that's not right. And you'll see the examples he gives. He says, because there's an underlying pushing off of Hashem as the king. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful in that area, but you got to try. To neglect it, that is where the crime lies. And if we don't neglect and we try our best, and we're still not successful, that's okay. Hashem will deal with it later. There may be certain averos that we never take care of in this lifetime. We failed. For whatever reasons. Maybe it's our fault. Maybe it's not our fault. Whatever. So Hashem will say, listen, you're going to go to Olam Haba, but there's going to be a little detour on the way. I gave you a chance in your lifetime to clean it up. You didn't. I love you dearly, but you still can't enjoy Olam Haba. But you made a lot of effort and you really cared. You really tried. But you were a lazy guy. What can I say? You're a lazy guy. You didn't have the fortitude. You didn't work on it enough. Okay, 3 months stop in Gehenna. We'll clean it up and we'll take care of it, and you'll rehab over there, and then you'll go to Olam Haba. Because. So that you are deserving of Olam Haba, but you're going to have to go to the repair shop for a while. But the guy said, I never really cared. I don't care about you at all, Hashem. But it was my lifestyle, so it's part of my lifestyle, so I do it. It can't be the one. It will be more than that.
So if there's one mitzvah, the 613 that you quote don't care about, then it's as if you didn't care about
it's a mumr l'davar echad ein lo chelak l'olam haba. It's just the Rambam. Can't argue on it. Again, remember what is. Let's go back to fundamentals. What is Olam Haba? What's the pleasure of Olam Haba? Having 99 virgins cater to every one of your needs? Then maybe that would be true. They'll give you 98 virgins. Well, that version of Olam Haba. Okay, you're not going to get the full 99 virgins. I'm going to take off a few. Okay, I still have 97. Not bad. But that's not what Olam Haba is. Olam Haba means forever feeling and enjoying the closeness with Hashem. And that's the only thing you ever want. And if you say, really, I couldn't care less what you have to say about this mitzvah, because you don't know what you're talking about, that means that is defining the relationship. And then, so what do you mean? So why are you doing this? Because the others suit me. So you're only doing it to suit yourself. We never have you have this a lot. Don't you think there's so many relationships out there in frum, observant homes where there's no relationship? It's not there. But they were trained, and this was the way life is, and you're married. But that other woman is not your whole life. My career is very important to me. My friends are very important. What people think about me is very important. How much money I make is very important. Okay, and part of that, as part of being a Jew is, okay, you have a wife too, it's part of the game. You have some kids. Maybe you really love your kids because you feel that's going to be your perpetuity. And your wife was just, the way to be able to facilitate that. And it's, life works out easier to have a wife because then, it's built in the expectations. The price to pay to have a wife isn't as much as, getting it done without a wife. And there's, unfortunately, that's when the secular world marriage is finished. It's finished. Why does anybody get married? Why? They don't need to. What do you need to get married for? That whole concept is fading away. And it's It's so with Jews it takes longer, chas v'shalom, for it to happen, but it's out there. It's out there. Not saying everybody, but it's if you're doing this without thinking why you're doing it, so then you just say, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We can go on, but let's move on.
Okay. All right. So now.
Thank you.
So now we're going to continue in Zion, and is going to continue about this. Even though he's saying va'od, but it really Zion and Ches are continuing with this idea. So there's one other thing I had to mention before I forget. So this explains all this. Very much is the underlying factor behind what we read in last week's Torah portion, Parshas Kiseitze. Parshas Kiseitze, we spoke about the first inyan in the parsha was the parsha of the Yefas Torah, the parsha where the husband goes to war, and he comes back and he brings a non-Jewish woman back from the battlefield. So if you look at that parsha there, it creates all kinds of questions on fundamental questions about Yiddishkeit. You know, Orthodox Judaism has many criticisms against other strains of Judaism that basically are compromising on Judaism in ways that are not acceptable. So the big problem that we have as religious Jews is how do we explain the parsha of Yefas Torah? It seems that a non-Orthodox God wrote the parsha Yefas Torah. Because look what the Yefas Torah parsha is. The guy comes back. There was a pretty woman on the battlefield who's trying to seduce this guy, obviously, or even if not, he was captivated by her good looks. She is not Jewish. This is not what we would call an ideal shidduch for a nice yeshiva boy, a nice kollel guy. Remember, only the best guys went out to battle. So he brings home a face of Madonna. Can you imagine, ladies, your husband goes out to battle, you're saying Tehillim for him. Oy, Hashem, he should be okay, mamish. And you're crying, and it's mamish unbelievable. And you hear your husband's coming back. Oy, Baruch Hashem, he's coming back. He says, oh dear, I brought you some company. Madonna, 20 years your junior and 20 years better looking face, So Rashi there quotes Chazal and says, what's going on over here? So it says, listen, better we should find, and there's a 30-day conversion process. Right? And if at the end of the 30 days he wants her, he can keep her. Right? So Rashi says, you know what? The Torah knows that if you're not going to allow the guy to bring her back, then in a permitted way, he'll do it in a prohibited way. So better, what's the expression? He should eat meat, just like an animal that's dying, right? If it dies, and you don't shecht it, you don't slaughter it, you can't use the meat. But if you slaughter it before it dies, you could use it. But it might not be the healthiest meat, but it's still kosher. So better to make a conversion that is within the realm of halacha, so it's a kosher relationship, because if we say it's forbidden, the guy would do it anyway. And he'd eat treif. That's Rashi right there. So you look and go, bang! Wow! Well, so then what's wrong with the other strains of Judaism? They say the same thing. Nebuch, how can they go to Shul on Shabbos? Everyone lives in the suburbs. What are they going to do? Jews aren't going to Shul on Shabbos. You know what? We decided it's okay. God is kind. You can drive to Shul on Shabbos. There has to be equality amongst people. Women can get aliyahs. Women, So better, because if you don't give in this, people aren't going to accept the religion. Story. And now you have Farish and Torah saying the same thing. So the answer is, there's 2 points here. The answer is, number one, the fundamental answer is war is not the same as anything else. In other words, when you're in suburban Canada, you know what? You can buy a house near the shul, and that's not the end of the world, right? You're not going to die if you buy everything. But when you go to war, as we've said many times, war is not the normal way human beings live, and God understands that's not the normal way that human beings live. where you can die any second, and you watch your friend's head get blown off. You know what? All the spiritual realities of life and concept of neshama, temporarily go out the window because you now have been turned into an animal. You go without a shower, you go without normal food, you're slinking on the ground in the mud, you're one piece of mud, and you kill or be killed. I mean, you now are, and the noise and the screaming and the clashing and the smashing, and this is not an atmosphere that's conducive to be a Jew. You're rendered temporarily into an animalistic state. The Torah recognizes it. So the Torah says, when you're in that state, we're going to have to relax the standards just a touch, temporarily, because otherwise you don't have anybody to talk to. The guy's an inch away from death. So he's totally into the physical world. And to expect spiritual realities of the levels that the Jewish religion expects from people, in the middle of a battle, it's unrealistic. And God made you. God knows your nature. And God says, I know your nature, and I can't expect you to live a certain way. However, within reason. We don't let the whole thing go. Okay, you're tempted by the woman. I'll tell you what, you could have her temporarily, we'll see, pending, bring her home, and then we'll deal with it. Right? Bring her home, and we'll deal with it. And then during the 30-day process, shave her hair off, make her look ugly, let your wife look pretty, and then let's look 30 days later, and you've calmed down, and now make your decision. Okay? And more often than not, the guy will say, I made a mistake. Right? Now, what's the point? Why are we... So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz adds a very important point. He says, he gives an analogy to, let's say you have a corral. It's the same idea for all of us. You have a corral, and you have hundreds of cows in the corral. And the corral goes, let's say, for miles. The perimeter is miles. It's a great corral, holds them all in. One part of the corral, there's an opening about 6 feet wide. So, do you say you have a wonderful corral that only is 6 feet deficient, or do you have no corral?
No corral.
You have no corral. Why?
You can get out.
Because every cow can get out. It may take a couple hours, but they'll all get out. Right? Now, let's say, so now you got two options here. Either you're going to fix it, just put another piece of wood. What if I fix it by expanding the corral outwardly a great distance, but I still close it up at the end? Is it still a corral?
Sure.
Now, I can fix it straight, just put one board in. Or for whatever, I decide I'm going to expand it another 50 yards and make a big loop, but it closes. Still works. Maybe the cow can go a little further, but he's still in the corral. So, the same thing. When we deal about mitzvahs and averos, if you're keeping all 613, the corral is tight. Once one avera comes, the corral is open. It's open. Once it's open, everything can get out. Now, hopefully, you'll fix the corral quickly. Sooner the better. Or maybe instead of breaking the corral, what if instead of it getting busted, the corral just gets moved and expanded but not broken? Well, then you still have a corral. So, when the guy is coming and he meets this Yafas Toar, so if the Torah says, don't touch her, don't look at her, if you dare bring her back, you're a sinner, you're terrible, you're this and that, you know what? He's going to do what he pleases, he's going to break the corral. But if the Torah says, we want you to know, one of the 613 mitzvahs is, one of the 613 mitzvahs is Yafas Toar. It's a mitzvah for you to take her, bring her home, and deal with her the way you should deal with her. So what has the Torah done? It's expanded the corral a little bit. It's given the person a little bit more room to maneuver, but it's still within the system. Now what's the beauty of this? Because we don't want the God will not put you in a situation where you will for sure fail, and then when you say, and you've broken the corral, and you know what, and in this area you're not going to concede. Because it's an area that's hard to give up. And then that's going to be the one you're not going to give into at all, and then the whole thing's going to fall apart. But if we incorporate it in the corpus of Judaism, and we're saying, you know what, you're still not a sinner. Now we don't do this any time other than war. Okay, remember that. It's the same thing. You don't call up the rabbi for a heter when everything is fine. You understand? And therefore we say, you still are bound by Jewish morality. Okay, Jewish morality, in this one case, by war, God has cut you a little more slack than he normally would, but you still have rules you have to function within that, so the guy still believes that he's a God-fearing Jew. And he, as long as he doesn't break the laws of how it has to happen, you have to wait the 30 days, you have to still want her, and then you convert her, and all these things. Okay, the guy says, no, I'm just bringing her home and we're married. You're breaking the laws. But as long as he's keeping the laws, you're keeping him in the loop. And because Torah knows once you break it once, and especially in the area of immorality, it's so hard to let her go. Once she's got her, if he takes her in a forbidden way, it'll remain in a forbidden way. And that'll be that mitzvah that he's totally disregarded. And that'll make him the mummer l'davar echad. That'll make him the apostate, for one thing. So the Torah has to go out of its way to not let that happen to the person. That's why the Torah goes out of its way. It's very rare kind of case. You know, and the truth of the matter is, you know, in terms of parenting and things like that, you got to be awfully careful. Although we don't, God forbid, we're never condoning people to do averos, you know. But we have to know, you know, where to cut slack for our children, where to cut slack for our congregants. You know, don't bring it always to a head. Either you're going to do this, or you know, it's a very bad sin. You know, sometimes, you know, don't build it up to such a point. If you do this, you're a terrible Jew, and this and that, and then because one guy will do it, and says, and you know he's not in a position to want to change. Then already his whole attitude about himself is, I really don't care about the religion, and you might be creating a false, especially with teenagers. You got to be awfully careful. Be awfully careful. And you got to know, okay, you can cut some slack. You have to know how much slack to cut. But sometimes we make our own kids a mummer l'davar echad. We tell them how terrible it is, and you're a Russian, you're this and this. How can you do this? You have to be careful, because then the person says, okay, and then I really don't care. You're making them more aware of what, that's where the aspect is, where sometimes you have an halacha, better let the person do the avera without knowing about it, unknowingly, than to tell them, and they will for sure do it anyway. There's certain times we say this. Same idea, because why make him a mummer l'davar echad? Better he shouldn't know. He won't be a mummer l'davar echad. And there'll be a time later where we'll explain it to him where he's able to handle it. Okay, we're not, God forbid, compromising on the religion. At the end of it, we want them to keep everything. But you have to know when to, they call this a hora shah, it's extenuating circumstances. So the truth is, when you call your rabbi, if he's your rabbi and he knows you, he'll know if this is the time to give the fellow a leniency or not. Because he knows the person. He'll know, maybe sometimes there is a place to do a leniency, because that still keeps him within the corral. We don't want to make a person be a mummer l'davar echad. So that's extremely important. Now, Rabbi Yonah now in Sif Zion.
Yeah, but isn't that exactly what Rabbi Yonah is against right now? Right in here, we're discussing this, that he tells you once you do that, you're off the path, you're off. So what we're talking about here is leniencies. That's number one. Number two, we're talking about a rule that was applied in those days, because war in those days, you were allowed to take slaves, and today it doesn't apply anymore. So why do, I don't understand this, number one. And number two, if they allowed it then, and also the marriages, that a man was allowed to have so many wives, How do I accommodate all these things today? I don't
Okay, we're getting way too many things over here.
I know, I understand, but
I can't, this going way
I
back.
understand that, but these-
I'll
these
just
are-
say one thing, it's applicable nowadays. Remember, the idea of war is basically you have no time to think, you have no time, it's noisy, it's loud, it's not a normal environment.
There's war today, people don't do this
saying-
anymore.
Okay, remember, certain laws we can't do because we don't have a Sanhedrin, we don't have a Bezdin. It's different kinds of wars. We don't have these wars nowadays. But in an existential sense, there are many times where a person goes through tremendous conflict in his life, where he is going through a tremendous amount of instability in his life, where let's say the person is at a certain stage where psychologically the person is impaired. He's borderline to a nervous breakdown. There are people like that, even today. Borderline nervous breakdown. One more thing, he'll pop. He'll go crazy. He'll throw away the whole religion. So the clever educator will say, you know what? Let's try to make some kind of temporary compromise. So that he doesn't go off the deep end and then give up the whole religion.
Rabbi Yonah doesn't say that.
No. Rabbi Yonah is saying we don't want a person to willingly, unconsciously, his whole life say, I don't give a darn about this. The Torah is saying temporarily we can make exceptions when there are extenuating circumstances that are way beyond what's the normal way a person lives. Because God created that tremendously challenging situation himself, and he understands what it does to people. War is not the typical way to live. It is the vast minority of the life of a person. But we can't let that one time where you could lose it will affect the rest of your Yiddishkeit. So temporarily, God relaxes the expectations within the framework of halacha, but then right when you come back, all the laws apply again. And that we apply even today. If you have a child who, God forbid, is almost off the derech, he's off the path of Yiddishkeit. And if you're going to crash it all in him and say you're a sinner and you're a this, and so sometimes you got to say, okay, we'll cut him temporarily. We're going to say, listen, what you're doing isn't so great. I want you to know, but we're not going to make a big issue right now because you're going through a lot of turmoil. Now you have to be very careful how to exercise this, because a lot of times it's not that bad. You can't cut the person slack. And you need to be very wise and sagacious to know when to give this kind of advice. But sometimes, that makes all the difference in the world. At that point in time, sometimes it comes a point in time where a person can't hear anything from anybody. The person's gone over the edge. We could create scenarios very easily. You have a guy who was successful in everything, and his business collapsed. He was not used to being poor and destitute, and then his wife leaves him, and then he gets sick, and this and that, and a million things, and he's just being bombarded by everything. And you know what? And if you're going to say how terrible he is, and you don't cut him any slack while he's going through this tremendous period of no clarity, and he's not in a position to be able to hear what's right and wrong. So you have to know when and how to cut him a little slack. And when things settle down, let's come back and say, okay, we're not going to make a big deal now, but it's something we do have to deal with later. Yeah, it's very tricky. But that's what the Torah is saying. If you're going to make if you have a kid, you drive nuts. You will come to Shul. You will daven for 3 hours. You won't talk for a second. What's the reason we made a youth minyan on Shabbos? For the young bar mitzvahs. Why do we make a youth minyan? Do you think youth minyan is such a great minyan compared to our minyan? It's not. The kids talk a bit, and they don't daven so well. But we're going to say, no, you, Mr. 12-year-old, you sit here for 3 hours and you don't turn your face away from the sitter and this and that, and you dare flinch, you'll get frosk and this and that. What's going to happen? That kid's not going to stay Jewish very long.
But it's a learning process. That's a different
but it's the same concept. He can't hear you right now. He doesn't understand what we're talking about. And you know what? He's only 13. What do you expect? But he knows it. But if he'd say, I'm not going to minyan, no, you're going to minyan. Okay, he'll go to minyan, but it's got to be with his friends. Okay, but the idea is, but you guys know, this doesn't last forever. And there'll be a time where you have to learn how to be able to daven with the older people, because you will one day be an older person. And this is not the way it's always meant. That's the risk of, there's certain shuls that in this city, and in other cities as well, where you've got, a minyan of older guys. It's not part of the main minyan, and you wonder what's going on. It was a youth minyan that was from 30 years ago that they never grew up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Young married.
Yeah.
They never grew up.
Young married.
And that's not good. You have to eventually grow up. So Rabbi Yonah is saying, as long as you're prepared to grow up, things will be fine. If you're not prepared to grow up, then we have a problem. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.